We here. Another episode of
Three pillars of man, baby. What we
Sir.
talk about,
Where we talk about the continuous improvement of the mind, body, and spirit.
amen.
And so today, what we're going to talk about, and the title of our podcast is Arrested Development When Growth Gets Stuck. And as you know, I like to always open up an episode with a quote. When we are stuck in our past, we are condemned to relive it, not as memory, but as limitation. Dr. Bruce Perry. And to give a little bit more insight behind the quote, this quote speaks to the hidden consequences of unhealed wounds and unresolved experiences. When development, emotional, mental, spiritual, or even physical, is arrested, we aren't simply paused in time, we're trapped by that moment. The past subtly governs our present decisions, relationships, and self perception. We don't just remember the past, we live within its limitations. Arrested development is not a conscious choice, it's a subconscious imprisonment. And to provide a little bit more definition behind the arrested development theory, for those of you that don't know, is arrested development refers to the stoppage of significant delay in normal psychological, emotional, and social growth, often rooted in trauma, neglect, or enabling environments. It is not exclusive to childhood. Adults can experience arrested development from unresolved life events, breakups, betrayals, failures, or traumatic incidents. And so the first discussion question, based on what I just read today, is what causes individuals to suffer from arrested development? What do you think, my brother?
One more time with the question.
Sure.
No, what you just gave.
Wise Gabe? Sure. Just like the whole insight and everything?
No. Just the question.
Just a question. What causes arrested development within individuals?
Okay. I mean, so what you basically just covered inside the intro, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
not going through the things, not actually facing the problems that you have,
Yeah.
right? And some of those can be from myself and my perspective and how I feel about it.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that I've run into in relationships are from my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
uh, for the most part.
All right.
And then there's the things that I've run into as an adult, right?
Mm-hmm.
People burn you, and then so you apply that to everyone around you.
Right.
Um, I think there's a lot of things there, right? But uh, there's a quote that the more things that you face head on that you're purposely trying to ignore,
Mm-hmm.
the further you're going to get in life.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a saying or if it's a quote that I heard or whatever, but
Sounds good to me.
that's the
Yeah, just
perspective, right?
right. Right.
Is there's these things that happen, there's the things that you go through, whether it's traumatic or not traumatic, whether it's in the forefront of your head or it's in the back of the subconscious and you're not thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
These things are how you operate. These are the things that you do on a regular basis that you don't really pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things where you have an altercation or a disagreement with someone and you handle it a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things the needs that you need to be met that
Yeah.
you're not meeting personally,
Yeah.
right? So you haven't done the work on yourself,
Yeah.
and so you seek it in another person. In psychology, I think it's called a stachoma.
Mm.
The idea of the things that you purposely ignore,
Yeah.
uh, that that are ultimately hindering you
Yeah.
or making you the person that you are, and you can always become better, right? So you always have to face the certain things, and certain things can draw these out of you.
Yeah.
from my perspective and what I've learned is, going through divorce, going through a relationship that I was in
Mm-hmm.
and thought that that's the right path for me and how I needed to handle things, and
Yeah.
ultimately it just wasn't working out.
Yeah.
Um, but there were certain things that happened in those moments that ultimately um, that ultimately caused issues in the relationship.
Yeah.
And then they me being in a new relationship now
Yeah.
have become even something that I don't recognize.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when in an not altercation, but in a disagreement with a spouse, or a friend now,
Yeah.
right? There's things that I never paid attention to or weren't as bad, so I didn't have to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
And now going back to our common point is I easily shut people off
Right.
and just move on with my life, and they're just gone.
It's just a quick, and it's a defense mechanism that you can quickly implement because you know, like, okay, I know if I do this defense mechanism that I've always do, I know the result of it,
Hmm.
right? So I think, like you said, as far as just with relationships, it's so easy for us to, because we got burnt once, and you see it happen. You see it on social media, you see it on everyday life where people always say like, oh, that's why you can't trust no one. And I was guilty of saying that as well, right?
Hmm.
It's just like, oh, people are gonna be people, and this is why you can't trust no one. You always gotta be, by yourself and everything. And I fell into that trap also. But I think once you get into like a new relationship and you're with somebody that's actually, that actually is invested in you, you do, I think what a lot of us don't do, and we've talked about it in many episodes, is where we don't pause and think and self-reflect on those past things that happened to us because, I just think about us, we're more of, okay, it happened, let's move forward.
Yeah.
Let's not even try to figure out like why it happened or try to resolve that
Hmm.
situation. We're just like, let's just move on and we'll figure out the best way we can going forward. But sometimes in order for you to go forward, you need to take just a
Hmm.
quick step back. Don't get stuck there
Yeah.
because that's where I think a lot of this arrested development happens is you get stuck in that moment where you did get burnt or just to move from relationships. You see a lot of people have like called like the Peter Pan syndrome where
Hmm.
and I think that particular thing can just be based off of fear of not wanting to accept responsibilities as you get older.
Yeah.
Like to that example, how you met somebody that seems like they're just stuck in like this moment, and it could be a common example is like somebody you went to high school with and
Hmm.
they were like the popular person and
Hmm.
everybody knew them. They were it. They were the cool
Big
the
fish
big fish
in
in
the
the
little
small
pond.
pond, right? And then now you put that fish in the ocean. Now you realize like, oh wow, there's sharks.
Yeah.
So then it's like mentally, they're like, nah, I can't. I
Yeah.
don't even want to go into the ocean. I'm gonna stay here where like I was loved and
Right.
revered and everybody looked to me like I'm essentially it's like the main character syndrome.
Right.
So that's where this like Peter Pan syndrome comes in. It's like psychologically where you just can't like you're physically aging, like you're in your 30s or 40s now, but like mentally you're still stuck in that moment where like
Right.
you were revered and loved and it's just interesting because those type of people is just like eh, you know they haven't, and there's a bit of delusion there too, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, why haven't you moved on? Like we've been out of high school for like 10 plus years now.
Right.
Like, why are you still stuck in that moment? But ultimately, it's fear. They don't want to accept that. When you're an adult now, you have bills, you have obligations. If you have a family, you gotta take care of your family, and that stuff's hard.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like those responsibilities do. make you grow. And so that's where that's why you don't see a lot of people, psychologically uh mature. Their body matures, but psychologically they don't.
Right.
So that's why, you know, a lot of times, and I feel like now that I'm older, I understand like maturity doesn't really come with age. It comes more with like what you've experienced. Like,
Right.
you've probably met people who are younger than you, who are, younger than us, and they're like have a mindset of like a 40-year-old man. But
Yeah.
then once you get to know them, you realize like, oh wow, they've had these traumatic experiences, or whether it's a childhood or even just recently within their adult life, they've been able to uh just navigate through those and accept like, hey, that happened, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen going forward.
Right.
And so I do want to ask you, have you ever had a moment where you felt like, okay, whether it was relationships or business or whatever, where you did have that arrested development mentality, and what do you felt like you did to try to get out of that arrested development mentality?
Yeah, that's a good question. The idea that or the thought that comes into my head is um I noticed a lot of it this year.
Mm,
So getting into a new relationship, getting into um my business developing and there's certain things that were happening and whatever, which overall ended up forcing me emotionally to move forward from where
hmm
I was at, right? Because
Yeah.
I was in a place where I was like, I'm on my time, I'm doing my thing, this is what I want to do, however I want to do it, and I was taking on more of a role to where, I was having um other things put on me
hmm
in the sense of whether expectations of myself, and I wasn't meeting some of them
Right.
uh, professionally, but also personally, and that was forcing me to actually look at myself and be like, okay, well, what can I handle at this current moment, right?
hmm
And am I stretching myself thin, um, and being able to kind of open up that self-awareness again, but for me it was that moment, kind of getting out of a space that I was comfortable in,
Right.
right? Because I was locked in. I was going to the gym every day. I was doing jujitsu every day. I was da 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 da.
Yeah.
I was waking up at specific times, like that 5 a.m. number. Like I was up.
Yeah.
No, there was no problems
hmm
because I was locked in,
Right.
right? I was in that space of I have nothing else to do other than
Just focus on me.
right.
Yeah.
And so those moments where that lasted probably 8 years,
hmm
um, and then I got into a space where everything was new,
Yeah.
and maybe emotionally I was like, well, I'm just going to take on more stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm feeling a
Put more on
hole,
my plate.
yeah.
hmm
And I wasn't meeting the expectations that were pressed on me. So uh, ideally, that was one of those moments that allowed me to see that arrested development because I was stuck in a space where my mindset was here,
Right.
right? Oh, I'm doing all these things. I'm great, whatever. Everything's normal.
Yeah.
But in reality, nothing was normal.
Yeah.
Like everything had changed, and I wasn't accepting it. Up, overall, I was being free willy, like I was acting a
Yeah.
fool, right?
Yeah.
Um, and ultimately ended up hurting some people and causing chaos
hmm
and a lot of things and um, ultimately not really being the person that I know that I am.
Yeah.
And that's when I was realizing like I'm out of my own box
Yeah.
and I need to figure out how to pull that back together. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Hell yeah.
and
Yeah.
still trying to do that correctly. Like there's
hmm
a lot of things that aren't locked in the way that they should be,
hmm
but I'm getting back on the the clearing of space, right? So I'm in alignment with my work for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not over exceeding, but I'm not underachieving either.
Yeah.
So I'm in that space where I'm reaching for more, but I'm taking my time with it. Whereas the past year, I was just like just foot on the gas. There was no, and I had no direction.
Right.
That was the problem.
Yeah.
Like I was still operating like everything was normal,
Yeah.
and it wasn't. No, nothing was normal. My mindset was not normal. Nothing was set. So I think that was my space there.
You were just driving, but you didn't have a destination.
Right,
Yeah.
because everything that I knew ultimately had blown up in smoke in front of me, and I'm just
Yeah.
driving by it, like, okay, well, the ground will appear as it comes up, right?
Right.
So yeah, not really having a direction towards what I was wanting to do.
No, that's
Yeah,
real,
what
man.
about you?
I'll say for me, it was I would say three like instances where like I had to realize like, okay, this is not this is what was. Now I have to be more of this is what it is. So like making that transition of a mindset. So like the first example was when I first got to college. And I went to a Virginia Military Institute. So one complete like culture shock, right? Like I'm going from um, you know, high school had, even though we sucked football team, but like individually, had good stats, all that, and was able to get a full scholarship and everything. So you essentially you're going from being like quote unquote like the guy, right, on the football team versus now you go to a school and as a freshman, they call it like your first 6 months, kind of like a uh, say like a initiation, like hazing,
Hmm.
that type of thing. So they call you a rat,
Yeah,
right? Call you a rat. Like
yeah,
that's what the first 6 months, you're not even a freshman, you're a rat. So, um, and that can play with your ego because you're coming from like, okay, I was all region, I was, one of the best players on my team, whatever,
yeah.
and then now I'm being called a rat. And then you're getting called a rat by somebody that's smaller than you. So like,
Hmm.
that plays with your psychological your mental, man. And so like just alone going to a military school and how everything is, you wake up at 6, then we got morning formation, then we might have a uniform inspection, then you go to class, and then, you know, that part of it was still a shock to me, but it wasn't as a big of a shock because of how I grew up with my
Yeah.
parents and my dad being military and my mom just being very like adamant about cleanliness and or
Hmm.
being orderly, like, so that wasn't much of a shock, but just overall, just a culture shock. And also, man, being 8 hours away from home, where and I'll give this like even more like this example here. So it was we had a scrimmage. This was our fall camp, football camp scrimmage, um and earlier that day before the scrimmage, right, we had to do a 5 mile ruck. And literally the whole way there and the whole way back, like somebody was just in my ear, like, James, hurry up, James, hurry up. You're last, hurry up. Oh, you he ain't cuss, but he's all you football players, y'all supposed to be in the front, da da da. I'm like literally five miles there and 5 miles back to the school, like just in my ear. So I'm just sitting there, just like not saying nothing, like just pissed. So that happened before the scrimmage. So going into the scrimmage, I'm already like out of my space, like mad as hell. Like this fucker
Yeah.
like was yelling at me for 10 miles, and now I gotta go do a scrimmage and put pads on and all that. So, long story short, scrimmage went well. Like I did great. Like, did great. And then afterwards, um, I was in the coach's office and talking to the coach. Then I just started like crying out of nowhere. And it was like it wasn't like a sad cry, it was like piss cry,
Hmm.
like. And then he was just like he was like, "What's going on?" And so I was just telling him, "Man, these fuckers stuff." Like I just went off, and he knew like I was out of my character
Hmm.
because I'm very reserved, and so uh, he called my he called my dad, and so and also you're not supposed to have your phones
Yeah.
as a freshman, so but we kept our phones in the locker room, so. He ended up calling my dad and he was like, "Hey, I think you need to talk to Alex. He had a bad day. He just needs to he had a bad day." So I talked to my dad. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, "Man," he's like, I don't know, Dad. I don't know, I don't know if I can do this, man. This school is I don't know if it's for me, man. I don't know. I think I want to come back home and, maybe transfer to Kennesaw or Georgia State, somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so he's like, so, you remember when you sat me and your mom down and told us you were going to this school? I was like, yes, sir. And he was like, and, I always say you start what you finish, right? I was like, yes, sir. Pause. It felt like forever, but it was only like maybe a minute.
Yeah.
But he paused, didn't say nothing else. And so I took that as like, okay, I get what he said. I was like,
Hmm.
okay, Dad, I understand. I'll talk to you later. He's like, all right, talk to you later. And so in that moment alone, that's when my mindset shifted because it was like, oh shit, I can't go back home. Like he literally just told me, like, hey, I don't know where you're gonna live, but
Yeah.
you're not coming back home. So you chose this place, you need to figure
Yeah.
it out. So that was a big moment for me because it made me realize like I can't just run back home. I gotta really like figure this out.
Yeah.
And so that was one example. And then the second example was when I finally graduated from the military school and then I moved to Charlotte and was just on my own. And then also like around your wedding your wedding time I had called you and I was like, man, I don't know, man. And this is where like I had in my mind I had gotten to like some
Yeah.
financial trouble and ran up some credit card debt and then tried to consolidate that with a loan and then got behind that. And so I was just like, oh, fuck,
Yeah.
and then I had called you. And then the funny thing was like, I had that situation going on and then I was still trying to buy a townhome and
Hmm.
I didn't know how that was going to play out. And so, and then I remember calling you and then I had came down here and, you had talked to me. He was like, bro, like, you gave me insight of what you got going on, and he was like, "So, bro, like, I'm, I'm in some shit too,
Yeah.
like, but he's like, I'm just gonna keep on rolling, and I'm gonna figure it out."
Yeah.
And so, um, that was another moment for me where it's like, okay, so this is not just me, like, this is not like my own like a problem that's like only focused on me, like
Hmm.
this is a problem that a lot of people are in this situation.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, like that encouraged me to be like, okay, I'm in this moment now, but I can still figure out like
Yeah.
how to get out of it.
Yeah. And what's crazy is during that moment, like you were talking about yourself, but I was like, I feel like he's talking to me. You know, but for real, like, because that moment, I was kind of going through the shit that I was going through,
Uh-huh.
and
Hmm.
just trying to figure stuff out, with obviously the relationship side of things, but also like the financial aspect. And like you're over here, like, man, I got this. I'm like, bro, that's it. That's it. Like, that saying, it's not John Jones, it's who is that cat? He's a fighter. Kumar? Is it Kumar? Either way. He,
Yeah.
he he basically he drops it, he's like, his mama always used to tell him like, you think your problems are big until
Right.
you start throwing them in a pile with other people's problems,
Right.
and it starts giving you perspective, you start picking your own stuff
Uh-huh.
back up. But
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
during that moment, I was like, man. I'm not very open, and so I was like, man, let me just show you something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm like,
We ain't
bro,
going to the gym. All
I was
right. Yeah.
like let me just show you something, and I pulled up my phone. I said, look, bro, this is what like you're there. I wish I had that situation,
Yeah.
and it was like I knew what you probably needed to hear, just because that's the same thing that I needed to hear,
Yeah.
and
You
I
were
just
speaking for the both of us.
yeah,
Right, right.
and it was just kind of like it was a cool moment. So yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, man. But like that just helped me where it was just like because I felt like I was spiraling, like going down a
Hmm.
rabbit hole and was getting more on this like self pity, like,
Hmm.
oh, how do I do this? How do I get into this situation? I'm not like, you just
Hmm.
went down this whole rabbit hole and then, you know, you, you put perspective on, my situation. And then also, my dad, he ultimately he was like, hey, look, because I had eventually told him, um, and he was just like, all right, look, here's what I'll do. Tell me the amount. I'll pay that. I'll pay it off for you. You just pay me back.
Hmm.
And I was just like, wow. Because I was so afraid to tell him because like I'm talking about he is such a personal finance like budget like he can tell you what he spent 5 years ago on like he's just that detailed about his budget and stuff and so like he always like preached that to me but
Yeah.
when I got to Charlotte it was like shit, graduated military school where I almost, almost failed out and
Hmm.
I was free.
Yeah.
So, my finances were free until it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I thought he was gonna yell at me, which is why I didn't tell him. And then, it just got to a point where it's like, yeah, I gotta let him know because
Yeah.
I'm kind of asked out. I mean, it got to a point where and this is when I had like moved in like originally moved like probably I was maybe a couple months into my new townhome in Charlotte and he was I was like man do I have enough to pay my mortgage like it was like I was being that dumb and so he ultimately bailed me out but those moments just again like how I said before it was just like okay let me not go down the rabbit hole or get into this victim blaming or self shaming, self
Hmm.
pity. Like, let me own this situation. Like when my dad had told me when I was at school, where hey, you better figure it out. You're not coming back here unless you're gonna go straight to work.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm pissed. I'm just pissed today. It's just a bad day.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. So let me just make it to the next day and then we'll figure it out. And
Yeah.
then, ultimately figured out and then I graduated. And then when I got into that little financial situation in Charlotte, I owned my situation where I was like, hey, I was just being stupid.
Yeah.
I wasn't being smart with my money, and and that's my fault. It's nobody else's fault. So I think that's what helped me not get into that like arrested development where because I owned those situations and after that I just created a plan to move forward.
Yeah.
So um
And to kind of double up on that, anxiety, right? Because
oh, good.
we were talking about that.
Yeah.
The idea of anxiety is isolation. You
Hmm.
think your problems are the only problems in the world,
Right.
right? Anxiety can be some of the most, it can be like one of the most selfish things to do,
Oh yeah.
right?
100%.
And because you're so caught up in your own problems that you're not thinking about or what other people are thinking about you or
Hmm.
whatever it might be.
Hmm.
Um, it can create that isolation,
Yep.
right? And that can create the isolation of the problem. It can create isolation of yourself.
Hmm.
And that's what I had experienced that for an entire year,
Yeah.
right? Just straight anxiety all the time. Every time I woke up, my heart rate was like 165. The moment I woke up, bro.
Shit.
Um, because it was just nothing ever turned off.
Mm-hmm.
It was like as soon as I woke up, my heart rate 125, 165, like I had just gone on a jog.
Yeah.
And every single morning I woke up for an entire year, bro.
Yeah.
It was just nonstop, just nothing. I couldn't slow down my brain.
Yeah.
Like everything was just on fire.
Yeah. It's like
And I knew we had that conversation. I
mm-hmm.
knew I had some understanding of like what you had gone through or
Yeah.
what you were going through in that moment. And I know what that isolation feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what ultimately led to that conversation that we had.
Yeah, man. And I think I think also another solution to not being in arrested development is like one, like those type of challenges and those type of failures create that uncomfortable space
Mhm.
where now your back's against the wall and you have to figure out how to move forward.
Yeah.
Because when your back's against the wall, you can't go backwards.
Yeah.
So now that your back against the wall, you have to move forward. But the beauty of that is when you're in those uncomfortable situations, you have no choice but to grow.
Yeah.
You know, it's just kind of like that old saying, the only way is up now. Once you hit
Hmm.
rock bottom, and it wasn't truly rock bottom, but when you're in your mind and you're battling that anxiety and that self doubt and self pity and all that self inflicted stuff, it can feel like you're at rock
Yeah.
bottom. But once you feel like, okay, my back's against the wall, like, and I feel like in that moment, that's the owning the situation you're in.
Yep.
Once you own that, okay, I got myself in this predicament because of bad choices, or it could have been circumstances I couldn't have controlled, right?
Yeah.
Once you own it, that's pretty much you saying, okay, my back's against the wall. Now I have to figure out how to move forward.
Right.
So, like, that's one thing. But also, I think some preventative stuff we can do is put ourselves in those, like, I like to say, like, voluntary discomfort, right? Like we do jujitsu, like, that's voluntary discomfort.
Yeah.
Um, going to the gym, that's voluntary discomfort. Um, even reading something new, like, that's voluntary discomfort because you're reading new information, digesting new information.
Yeah.
And so I think those are some of the things we can do to prevent that arrested development is if we do that continuous, like, putting ourselves in just, you know, just different situations where it's going to help us grow.
Right.
And also, like, in those situations, like, there's like a failure safety net, right? Like, um, what's a good example? Like just going to the gym, right? You got the safety bars, right? So let's say you're trying to PR and you go for your PR bench and you don't get it up, you just drop it on the safety bar.
Yeah.
So, you know, as long as you have those, as long as you have uh that failure net, that failure safety net or safety bar, go ahead and put yourselves in those voluntary discomfort situations.
Especially when you're young, bro.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Especially when you're young. In the 20s, the 20s to 30s, bro. I mean that's the time to if you're gonna try and start a business or you're gonna try and go for that job or whatever, like
Go ahead and do that.
make
Do
that happen. Like,
it. Yeah.
figure out the things that you need to figure out in your 20s.
Right.
But also have the safety nets of like save your money, right? Put the money in a Roth IRA somewhere.
Yeah.
Like make things make sense, but push,
Push.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, there's people who are 65 and they quit their job and go to law school. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's always time and there's always availability to do the things you want
All
to do.
people that are in their 60s starting jujitsu for the first
Hmm.
time, and I think just that's why I like jujitsu because you meet people who were training when they were small and now they're black belt at 14, 14, 16, whatever. And then you got guys who are in their like 60s and they're just starting out, and it's just I think that's like you're saying, bro. The ultimate thing, it's like if you're going to do it, regardless of age, just go for it, man.
Right.
And if you fail, hey, at least you tried.
That's right.
And so that's I like what you said there, man. It's you know, but arrested development can play a role in you not wanting to try stuff because you're still stuck in that moment or stuck in that what that trauma or something that you did and you failed and you like, oh no, I'm not going to put myself out there
Right.
again. And so I think that's the beauty of like people who can just like that is a superpower. People that can fail but keep going, fail but get back up, but fail and get back up. Just perseverance at the end of the day.
100%.
At the end of the day, man. But let's wrap this up, my brother. So like we talked about today, we just talked about the theory of arrested development, what it is, what are some causes of arrested development, what are some solutions to not becoming in that arrested development mindset. My brother, how can our listeners, viewers apply what we talked about today to our mind, body, and spirit?
That's a good question, bro. Um, Start facing the things that you don't want to face. The more problems that you can start solving in your life and in your business, whether that's a career, whether it's your own business, whatever it is, the more problems you can start solving, the higher value you can bring to people.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to understand and explain those problems
Mm-hmm.
is another part of that,
Yeah.
right? Because if you can go through something and then you can explain how you got out of it, then you are now valuable to someone who is in that problem.
Yeah.
Um, so one, as far as mind, we're always having things on our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
right? Be able to get to a space that you can wonder, you
Yeah.
can think, you can have your own space
Yeah.
to pray or just filter out thoughts or whatever it might be. So that would be that. Um, Body, understand when you're in a lull. Understand when you're in a space that you need to kind of break out of. I think we all have that,
All right, for
right?
sure.
Um, the things that we eat, the things that we do, our actions that um that we do. Like there's a lot of people spend their time on intent
Mm-hmm.
over action.
Yeah.
And the more that you can provide action over intent,
Mm-hmm.
then the more things you'll get done. So that would be body for me is not necessarily like a physical aspect of things,
Yeah.
but be cognizant of what you're doing. Be cognizant of the things that you're putting into your mind and your body and the things that you're consuming.
Yeah.
And try to be more of a creator than a consumer. I
Yeah.
guess that would be it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the arrested development can fester itself in action,
Oh, yeah.
and in the body. So
Yeah.
if you're eating nonstop or whatever, be cognizant of the things that you're doing on a regular basis.
Right.
Um, and then spirit, man, spirit. Know when you need to reach out to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Be able to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Be able to understand that you're not the only one going through those things.
Mm-hmm.
Be understanding that you can pray about the things that are on your chest,
Mm-hmm.
right? There was a moment, bro, during that year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a moment where everything was just kind of it was just too much, man. I felt like my brain was moving too fast. Like I couldn't concentrate on anything. My
Mm-hmm.
heart rate was always up. I knew when it was like a panic attack a day, dude. And I've never had experienced anything like that in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed space. I needed something, right? Outside of myself. I needed something outside of myself. And my granddad, on my mom's side, had given me a book. It was like Man of God was the
Mm-hmm.
book. And basically, it's just about like how to be a man in a relationship, how to be a man in a marriage, um, how to be a man just in life, but a man of God. And I had never read it. Right?
Yeah.
He gave it to me, signed it, whatever. And I'm going through all this shit, and I'm at a place in my life where I'm just like, dude, I'm gonna get through this, right? But I'm fucking tired of it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm done with all this shit.
Yeah.
Um, and the me just trying, me well enough to understand, like I get hyper fixated on things, and that was it. Like I was hyper fixated on like, why is this happening to me? Da, da, da. And ultimately, I ended up reading the book. Like I just sat down one Sunday morning and
Yeah.
just it sat down and read, and
Yeah.
I finished the entire book.
Yeah.
And I'm still like I feel a little bit better, like I feel calm a little bit, but still like give it an hour and I'm back.
Yep.
Right. And so that next morning I'm driving to work and I'm thinking like what's going on? Right? Because there's gotta be an issue. Like we understand as men um that if there's a problem, they can be solved with something.
Yeah.
Right. And so I read that book that weekend. I'm driving home that day. Just one of those days, like everything just feels like nothing got completed. I'm just on autopilot.
Yeah.
But I recognize that I'm on autopilot and I can't get out of it. So there was that. Long story short, I'm on the way home and I'm fixing to pull into like this the road before my house. And I'm like, God, I'm just gonna pray. I'm just gonna pray and just hope that this is it. And I was like, man, God, I just need you to take this shit off my shoulders, man.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not the most respectful way to handle the situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was like, God, I need you to take this off me, man. I can't whatever this is, like I can't do this. And then like the thought of like you don't get what is it? There was one thought that just popped into my head. I was like, God's not going to give you anything you can't handle, right? And that's so like just out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
it's just like that's like the breadcrumb that people give each other, right?
Right.
But I'm like, it's just that thought is like in my head. I'm like, God, yeah, if you don't take this off my shoulders, like I don't know how much more I can handle this.
Yeah.
Like genuinely. Like
Yeah.
I'm in that space
Yeah.
and I'm like I'm finishing up that and I'm fixing to pull into the neighborhood. And dude, it felt like someone had just like picked it all up.
Yeah.
Bro, like genuinely just picked it up, just made it like that much lighter. And I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Right. Right.
And I'm like trying to put myself back in that space of like, wait. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't right. Because this has been a year, genuinely 12 months of me just straight anxiety.
Yeah.
And just depersonalization of myself. Right. So like I'm not just everything. You can't understand the feeling unless like when I say depersonalization of myself, you would have to experience that to understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, dude, pulling into the neighborhood, and I remember like it was yesterday. It was just like, and it was just off.
So like.
Yeah, and I was like, bro, where like it was everything that I needed, but also super confusing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was that moment. So when I say that, I mean understand that you don't have to bear everything,
Yeah.
and especially as a man, we have a hard time with that, and that would be it.
Yeah.
That would be it. Understand that you don't have to bear it, but if you are going through it, understand that you're going through it.
Yeah.
Right, and understand there's you got to have the willingness to keep going,
Mm-hmm.
right? In that aspect of things. But yeah, so that was it.
No, man, that's beautiful, man. Yeah, I like that. I like that. That was beautiful, bro. I'll say for me, I'm just gonna again just try to kill three birds with one stone with a couple of things I'm about to say here. So, first thing is honesty and transparency. I think that is the biggest thing when it comes to avoiding the arrested development mindset. You have to be honest and transparent with where you are in life,
Hmm.
and you know, you got to be honest and transparent about your flaws, honest and transparent about your shortcomings, honest and transparent about situations that you're in, whether it was out of your control or self-inflicted. If it was out of your control, do your best to not get into that victim mindset where, it's like, oh, why does this happen to me? All that stuff, because that can lead you down a rabbit hole where you can, psychologically, you might not be able to get out of,
Yeah,
and also just, um, you know, when you practice that honest and transparency, that allows you to own the situation that you're in, and just own, your flaws. Own just you create ownership within yourself
yeah,
when you're honest and transparent. And I think that's something that can, honesty and transparency that can be applied across your mind, body, and your spirit. Regarding your mind, you have to be honest and transparent about your thoughts, honest and transparent about what you're thinking, what you know, what you don't know. And if you don't know it, there has to be like a curiosity there, like you said, to, go and learn that information, or don't just settle on what you know. Always
right.
be curious on, I can always improve and always learn. So I think that's one way to avoid arrested development in your mind, your body. Put yourself in those uncomfortable situations where it's like, you know, there's a thing called like progressive overload, right? So like, over time, when you don't just have don't just use the same weight every single week.
Right.
Like, one week you start with, you know, 135, put 5 pounds on the next week, five pounds on the next week, 5 pounds on the next week. And then if you get to a point where you can't do that, then stay there for a little bit, reassess, and then get stronger, and then keep doing it.
That's right.
So just always, when it comes to the body, always growth doesn't happen when you just go to the gym and or whatever physical activity that you're doing. You only grow if you put yourself in those uncomfortable situations. Like if it revolves around jujitsu, you know, try to, empty the gas tank out a little bit. If you're a person like kind of how I am right now, where you roll once and you're just
Mhm.
like, give me
Yeah.
give me a minute. But it's like, if you're trying to develop your gas tank, all right, roll once, get some water, and then go right back into it. Because the only way you're gonna get better is just by putting yourselves in those uncomfortable situations, and don't
Yeah.
be afraid to go against somebody that you probably lose within 30 seconds.
Right.
Don't let your ego prevent you from not putting yourselves in those uncomfortable situations where you can grow. Then spirit wise, man, I mean, you laid it out perfectly. I think there has to be an honesty and transparency where you have to understand, like, man, I'm not in my right mind right now, or my spirits is at all time low, or and I think what tends to happen a lot of that is, just with me, we can rely more on ourselves instead of God, right? And it's very hard because you don't see God, right? You don't
Yeah.
see him in your day-to-day activities. You don't see him when you're going to work. You don't see him when you're whatever you're doing. You just don't see him physically. But I think what tends to happen is, you know God looks below and, sees us like trying to handle all of life's problems by ourselves, and he's just sitting there like, if only he just come talk to me
Yeah.
and tell me what he's going through. I'll give him the strength to get to the next day.
Yeah.
And so sometimes he'll let you fail and let you get to that rock bottom spiritually, um, because he's ultimately, I feel like, God's trying to teach you a lesson where it's like, hey man, lean on me, man. Like I'm here to, have faith in me. Like I might not respond to you right now because I have an ultimate plan for you, but you know, I need you to see the error in your ways so
Yeah.
you can come to me and we can have a honest conversation and develop a relationship where now you can lean more on me instead of leaning on yourself. Especially in those situations where things are just totally out of your control. It's just like, a lot of times we can be lost in those situations because it's like you trying to figure out like, okay, should I did this? Should I have done this different? Should I have done that different? Like, what should I have done different? But it's like, there's nothing you could have did.
Yeah.
It was something that happened that's out of your control, and now we just gotta figure out how we can move forward. But
Yeah.
don't feel like you gotta take that on yourself. Don't feel like you gotta bear that yourself. Have that conversation with God, pray to Him, and make it an honest conversation. Because the funny thing is, like, we try to tailor our conversations like he doesn't see like what we're doing.
Right.
It's like, brother, I saw that. I see all your flaws. I see all your vices. I see everything. So you might as well just come clean and tell me what's up.
Yeah.
And so I feel like once we do that, that's when that, like you said, like you just feel like, so, oh man, like I feel like I can float right now,
Hmm.
like, and so that's the thing, man. Don't feel like you gotta, um, don't try to handle everything yourself, man. Just talk to God about it, and it might happen right then. It might happen, it might happen a year from now. But
Yeah.
I mean, just continue to have faith and like for myself, it's God who I have my ultimate faith in. But if you or whether it's Allah or Buddha or whoever your higher power is, just have faith and perseverance, and that'll get you through. So. That's my main thing about what can really continue to improve the mind, body, and spirit. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, family and friends, this concludes another episode of the Three Pillars of Man. Like I always like to end our episodes, we are just two brothers having an authentic conversation on how we can continue to uplift each other, and also how we can just continue to improve our mind, body, in spirit. Love you. Peace.
Don't forget to share.
Share, like, subscribe, and share again.